Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is part of the global emergency mobilization to end the genocide now. And thank you all so very much for joining us this morning. My name is Jill Stein. I'm one of the organizers with Lifeline for Palestine, which is what we all must be now, immediately. It's a great honor to be here with these amazing speakers and activists. It's a great honor to be here with all of you who've turned out today. Thank you so much for attending. And thank you especially to the people of Palestine, whose resilience and grace have brought us to this very difficult and amazing, incredible, profound watershed moment for humanity. So thank you for your leading us where we must all go together. I want to first recognize some of those who've been long pushing for real action at the UN to stop the genocide. I want to recognize Craig Mokhiber, whose experience as a former UN human rights official has really been key to recognizing the opportunity at hand to really make a profound change in our direction. Thank you to several organizations who've laid the groundwork for this mobilization, to Pingo, from whom we have a speaker, the director who is with us today. We're very honored to have him. To People Against Genocide Everywhere, Protect Palestine, Dawn, La Via Campesina, the Hague Group, and others. I also want to thank the many volunteers who have jumped in to help build this lifeline for Palestine on an emergency basis. I won't name them all, but in brief, Mark Alborno, Miriam Hale Gerardo, Jack Echalea, Elena Costa, Miriam Kamal, and so many others who've really put their lives aside in order to mobilize for this very critical, unprecedented opportunity that we have to make a profound change working through the UN at this time. So I want to welcome everyone here and basically to say we're here to launch this emergency mobilization that can end the genocide in Gaza. I want to start with just 3 quick points of overview for today's discussion. The first one, and perhaps the most important, is that in fact, we do have the power right now to end the genocide. We're accustomed to being told that we are irrelevant to the process, that humanity really has nothing to say about this, that the powers that be have decided our direction. But in fact, there are 4 conditions that make this profoundly different and which really do give us the power to change direction. And this is really our first our first message here that we want to support, namely that we do have the power and we should not take powerlessness for granted or accept that, which is basically told to humanity all the time. It's important to recognize a pro-Palestinian supermajority in the United Nations. And that's best seen in the September 2024 UN resolution endorsing the International Court of Justice rulings, demanding an end to illegal occupation and apartheid. There was an overwhelming vote. We need to remember that. That reflects the realities on the ground. It was 124 yes votes and 14 no votes. So almost by a 10-to-1 ratio, there is very solid support for Palestinian human rights, for ending this genocide now. Second point here is that the United for Peace mechanism bypasses the shameful US veto. So that too adds to the supermajority support. And then thirdly, that 1-year deadline set by the UN when it passed its endorsement and its own call for action. It gave the apartheid state of Israel 1 year to comply with these rulings. And that date is up. That one-year date is September 18th, which is an additional trigger for action that gives power to our mobilization right now. And the fourth factor here is that global outrage against Israel's depraved criminality has reached a tipping point. People are not going to take this anymore. The manufactured famine, the slaughter of children, the starving of ordinary people and their assassination while they're standing in line waiting for food, the murders of doctors, nurses, relief workers, and the press, and ordinary families. This has become absolutely intolerable. So these things combined to give this moment incredible power for a really profound change in direction, whereby we are no longer being told what is possible. We, in fact, are speaking out as humanity, instructing those who are supposed to be representing us. We are now taking the initiative. We are taking the offense to say what must be done. And in fact, we have the power to do that. And where this mobilization comes in is that this power needs to be taken into our hands to compel our representatives at the UN and the governments controlling them to compel them to hold the line for Palestine. The votes are already there. It's time for us to demand that that support for Palestine be maintained and that it not fade in the face of incredible US and Israeli opposition, intimidation, threats, and bribes. That's why we need to be there holding our public officials, our elected officials, and ultimately UN representatives. Their feet need to be put to the fire by everyday people. And so that pro-Palestinian supermajority needs to stand strong. And so we're going to urge you, and we're going to offer you actually many action opportunities, whether it's group letters, sign-ons, emails, phone calls, and rallies, and so on. We'll have a whole spectrum of activities that we'll be putting out, as well as, supporting very much at the core of this is supporting what these other organizations are doing as well. We will use our networks and our capacity to help lift up the actions that we are all taking together. And the more we can take these together, the more that we can build a coherent voice of global civil society here, the more we can use that power. So we look forward to doing that with you. We urge you to sign up on our website, lifelineforpalestine.com, in the sign up section so that we can all continue to coordinate. And we look forward very much to working with other organizations as well to all collaborate here. And two other quick points. One is that part of holding the line for Palestine is pushing for a strong UN resolution with real teeth and specific language. You're going to hear a lot more about that in the course of today's discussion. But that means, just to introduce it here, a UN protection force to distribute aid and to protect Palestinians, like the precedent set in 1956 by the UN General Assembly, which sent a protection force to Suez, compelling the French, the UK, and the Israeli forces to leave Egypt. Second, in this essential pieces of the resolution, of a strong resolution, is establishing a military embargo and comprehensive sanctions, which should have been established, at least 2 years ago and more, in fact. Establishing, or I should say, stripping Israel's UN credentials, as was done to apartheid South Africa in the General Assembly, and then establishing a war crimes tribunal, anti-apartheid mechanisms, and so on. So we urge you to join us, for us all to be working together here in taking action to build civil society pressure. That's the bottom line, and you'll hear more about that from various of our speakers. who have been, on the front lines. I think all of us really are on the front lines of taking visible action to really push the envelope among our government office holders and their policies as passed down to UN representatives. We have various materials that we will be posting. Some of them are not quite ready to be posted. If there's time, I'll introduce you to a PowerPoint. Some people love them, some people don't. But the idea is that it enables everybody to be a teacher. It writes down, along with references and supporting facts, the things that many people who are new to these ideas will want to have in one spot so that we can all be really the messengers for this global mobilization. So I'm going to stop there and bring us to our next speaker. I do want to add that hopefully we will have time for questions and responses at the end of our session. Please use the question function to submit your questions as they occur to you. Greatly appreciate that. Questions and comments as well. You can submit that all. So next, I am going to introduce Craig Mokhiber, who I think most of us are familiar with. Craig is an international human rights lawyer, a writer, an activist, and a former senior UN official. He spent more than 4 decades in the international human rights movement, including more than 30 years at the UN. In October of 23, he stepped down from his post as director of the UN Human Rights Office in New York, criticizing the UN's failure to stop what he described, rightly, as textbook case of genocide in Gaza, and calling for a new approach to Palestine grounded in human rights, equality, and international law. Can't thank you enough for all you've done for the movement. Craig, go ahead, take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jill. Thanks for your initiative, for your consistently principled voice, and for organizing this and inviting me to participate. Also to your colleague, Mark Alborno, who's done so much to make it happen. It's an honor to be here with all of these great voices that are on the panel. And let me just express at the outset my solidarity with the people of Palestine, those of you who are watching or listening today, and my deference to your agency. We have heard your calls to the international community in today's discussion as a way to look at one option for responding to that belated response. We know after 2 years of genocide that the genocide, the apartheid of the Israeli regime is only going to end through resistance against the regime, the steadfastness of the Palestinian people, the solidarity of the rest of the world, and the isolation and ultimately dismantling of the Israeli regime. That was the case in South Africa. This is a long struggle, as was the case in South Africa, and we need to all be in it for that long struggle. But the question that always comes up is, what can we do now? What can we do right now? And we know, all of us who are involved in this struggle, the essential role that boycott and divestment and sanctions and demonstrations and disruption and civil disobedience, the education work that we do, prosecutions under universal jurisdiction, civil cases, all of those things can be happening right now. But we can also respond to the Palestinian call for intervention from the international community through this mechanism mentioned by Jill, a Cold War era resolution that was adopted in 1950 called Uniting for Peace, that authorizes the UN General Assembly to act when the Security Council is blocked by the veto of one of its members. And under this mechanism, which has been used several times in the past, but usually only for symbolic resolutions, this time the UN could mandate a UN protection force that would deploy to Palestine specifically to protect civilians, ensure humanitarian aid, preserve evidence of Israeli crimes, and assist in recovery and reconstruction. And most important here, it could help to change the political incentive structure under which Israel and its complicit US partner are currently operating with impunity. Now, Jill mentioned this upcoming deadline that's been set by the UN General Assembly last year for Israeli compliance with the orders of the International Court of Justice, and with a promise of further measures to be adopted in the wake of non-compliance. That provides us a very particular moment for action. We know intervention is long past due, but this is a real opportunity to shine a light on this initiative. Now, I want to say there are a lot of models of intervention. And I have said in the past that given the genocide that's underway in Palestine, any country can legally intervene, either individually or collectively with others, to take action to stop the genocide. And indeed, it's an obligation under the Geneva Conventions and under the Genocide Convention for states to do so. They are legally obliged to do so. But of course, no country has done so, with the exception perhaps of the Ansar Allah government in Yemen. All of the others have stood essentially idly by when it comes to the question of intervention. And one of the ways that they can be encouraged to act is to give them an international mandate to do so. And that's why a multilateral mandate from the United Nations can provide those states, which, as Jill said, there is a supermajority. There's more than 2/3. Most of the world is actually aligned with Palestine and against this genocide. But if we provide them with a multilateral mandate that gives them the legal and political and diplomatic cover that many of them require, we have a better chance of encouraging the kind of intervention that we want. Now, here, I want to caution everyone who is listening. There are many proposals for intervention. Some of them are not about protection for the Palestinian people, let alone their liberation. Some of the resolutions that are circulating contain no protection at all, just another rhetorical call for a ceasefire and humanitarian aid and the release of hostages, but no concrete measures to actually change the situation on the ground. Others have called for civilian monitors for Gaza. Imagine a few dozen observers in blue vests with clipboards and radios. But there have been human rights monitors on the ground in Palestine for decades, including currently, and they perform valuable work, but they have no deterrent effect. They can't help to facilitate the delivery of aid, and the Israeli regime views them as no impediment at all to its actions in Palestine. There are other proposals, like the French and Saudi proposal, calling for a so-called stabilization force. But the details of that proposal suggest that such an intervention would not be designed principally to protect the Palestinians from the Israeli regime, but rather to keep an eye on the Palestinian resistance to renormalize the Israeli regime, even as it perpetrates a genocide, and then to restore the very cruel status quo that existed before October of 2023 with the caging of the Palestinian people. And I have to say this as well. There is a real effort to distract attention away from ending the bloody genocide that's happening right now in Palestine by shifting the conversation to a two-state solution or recognition of a Palestinian state. That's not solidarity, that is complicity. Yes, recognize a Palestinian state, but the order of the day is protection in the face of genocide. A lot of the proposals that have been put forward seem to be intended to try to resume the process of normalization of the Israeli regime and to resuscitate the ruse of Oslo. And we know that a return to an Oslo 2.0 will just be another smokescreen for Israeli impunity, where Palestinians are told they have to negotiate for their rights with their oppressor, as their rights and lands are continuously eroded and the regime status more and more normalized. That cannot be the answer. And then, of course, there is the sick and twisted proposal of Donald Trump for a direct U.S. occupation, ethnic purging, privatization, and a techno-colonial domination of Gaza, revealing once again the dangerous and deeply racist delusions of the U.S. empire. And finally, the Israeli regime itself has suggested the deploying of a proxy occupation force manned by forces from friendly Arab states that collaborate with the regime. As is, I think, self-evident, these proposals are not about ending genocide and apartheid. They're about entrenching them. So what is needed then is a human rights-based assessment that rejects any of those options and instead brings us to the United Nations. Now, that deadline that was set last year by the General Assembly for Israel to comply with the demands of the International Court of Justice is a deadline for further measures to be adopted. And as you can see in the diplomatic activity in New York, Western delegations are scurrying to stop those further measures from being adopted and to change the focus away from Israeli accountability and protection to focus instead on recognizing Palestine or resuscitating that dead corpse of Oslo in a so-called two-state solution. This would be another political process that normalizes Israel and marginalizes Palestinian self-determination and a smokescreen for Israeli abuses. That brings us then to Security Council scenarios. Now, the Security Council has the power to deploy an armed force and even to impose it against the will of any country under Chapter 7 of the Charter. But we know that the US, the UK, and France are all genocide complicit states that have the veto power in the Council. That means there are only two possible outcomes if you take it to the Security Council. Either a mandate that pleases the US, acting as Israel's proxy, and therefore would be disastrous for the Palestinian people and could be imposed against the will of the Palestinians under Chapter 7, or the US will veto any meaningful force that is proposed to the Council. So that means the Council cannot be the answer. You may have to start there depending on diplomatic moves in New York, but it will not provide relief. And that's why we're looking at the use of Uniting for Peace under the UN General Assembly. That's the point. The UN, the world doesn't have to surrender to a US veto in the Security Council. The UN General Assembly is empowered when it meets to convene under Uniting for Peace. There are historical precedents for doing so, and they can take extraordinary action. And that's what we're saying. A UN General Assembly resolution under Uniting for Peace could call on states to adopt comprehensive sanctions and a military embargo, to reject the United Nations General Assembly credentials of Israel, as was done with apartheid South Africa, to mandate a criminal tribunal, to reactivate the long dormant anti-apartheid mechanisms to address Israeli apartheid, and for purposes of this conversation, to mandate an armed multinational UN protection force to deploy to Gaza and ultimately to the West Bank, acting on the request of the state of Palestine to protect civilians, open the entry points via land and sea, and do all of those things that we said needed to be included. Now, they'll need a two-thirds majority to do so, but Palestine has requested this intervention, so no Chapter 7 action by the Security Council is needed. That means you don't have to worry about this kind of a force becoming a proxy occupation force, because its deployment and its remaining on the ground will be at the discretion of the Palestinians. And very importantly, as affirmed by the World Court in its findings last year, Israel would have no legal right to refuse, to obstruct, or to influence the mission. It does not have a say in the matter, according to the International Court of Justice, because it has no authority, no sovereignty, and no rights in the occupied Palestinian territories. Process is very simple. A proposal will be vetoed in the Security Council, most likely. Any member state that can then call for an emergency special session of the General Assembly under Uniting for Peace. A resolution can be proposed, and many drafts are already circulating. It can be adopted with a two-thirds majority, and then the UN will start soliciting troop contributions from member states to participate and deploy the troop. Now, legally, there are no hurdles. The rules allow for it. There are precedents, as Jill mentioned, the 1956 UN emergency force that was deployed to the Sinai by the same mechanism. But of course, the US and the Israeli regime will use everything in their power to try to prevent first the two-thirds majority by threatening delegations, or to try to water down the text to take out any meaningful content. And we know that the current lawless government in Washington may even threaten sanctions. It has imposed sanctions on the International Criminal Court, on the UN Special Rapporteur, on Palestinian human rights organizations. So it is not beyond that kind of lawless action. And it may even try to obstruct the force once it is mandated. And that's why the majority of member states will need to stay the course in the face of US and Israeli threats. The world needs to get up off its knees to stand up to the Israeli-American access and to its genocide. And global civil society has to be steadfast in its demands for protection and justice. Our job is to make sure there is a glare of public exposure under which states will be forced to vote either for or against protection of the Palestinians during a genocide. None of them will be able to hide behind a US veto, just throwing up their hands and saying, we tried. Once the force is mandated, it can deploy by land, sea, air, accompanied by international media, supported by diplomatic pressure from all of the countries for the perpetrators to step down. So I'll finish there and say, we are in the face of historic atrocities. The international system has failed. Part of the reason it's failed is because it has not had the audacity to use all the power that it has at its disposal, including the mechanism that we are discussing today. We are not naive. Success is not assured. The obstacles are significant, but we know that failure is guaranteed if we don't try, and time is of the essence. Genocide in Gaza, famine in Gaza, the genocide spreading across the West Bank, Israel expanding its military presence across Palestine, and then 18 September marking the end of the one-year deadline set by the General Assembly for further measures. That means the time for us to do this is now. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you so much, Craig, for reviewing all that. And for people who are hearing this for the first time, there will be a video of this available up on our website soon. So you can hear it again and again. And likewise, we'll be capturing some of the key talking points here in a PowerPoint as well, because today's goal is to make all of us the messengers and the vehicles for that globalization. And I'm just checking now, because we've had a little bit of last minute juggling, and maybe someone backstage can tell me, is it Mr. Ubay Abudi who will go now?
Yes.
Yes, okay, all right, great. And because of an emergency press conference that the director for Pingo had to attend, I do not at this time have the bio for Ubay Abudi, who is standing in for the director of Pingo, but I can just tell you, and maybe he can just give us a word when he comes on as well. I can just tell you, though, that Pingo is the Palestinian human rights organization. It is the umbrella network for some 130, 140 organizations. It's been longstanding. It really is the foremost organized voice for Palestinian civil society, and we are very honored to have you with us today, Ubay Abudi. Thank you so very much, and I'll pass the mic over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jill Stein, and apologies, my colleague Amjad in Gaza had an emergency press conference. I am also the secretary of the steering committee of Pingo, so I represent the organization, but from the West Bank. The situation that we as Palestinians are living through, it's not just the horrendous 22 months of ongoing genocide in the Gaza Strip and the ongoing ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. What we have been going through, what was termed by Noor Masalha, is the ongoing Nakba, the ongoing dehumanization of Palestinians, driving us away from our lands, driving us away from our ability to produce and reproduce in our lands, to have any kind of access to water, to land, to resources, to travel. And these kinds of violations, to be honest, they were normalized. It was treated as the status quo. Every country that used to come used to say, we want to keep the status quo. And the status quo was that there's Jewish supremacy, unfortunately, Jewish Israeli supremacy over Palestinians, where any Jewish that had an Israeli citizenship benefited from rights and from protections that were not offered for Palestinians. You know, before even 2023, before the ongoing genocide, it was the bloodiest year for Palestinians in like 20 years or so. It was the year that had the highest number of recorded killings of Palestinian children. The land seizures, everything in that regard, even the blockade on Gaza that was continuous from even the year 2000. 2005 was the year that the blockade was actually strengthened, but since the year 2000, Gaza has lived under the blockade. And the plans to kick out Palestinians from Gaza, you can trace it up until the 1950s. It was always a dream of the Israeli government and the Israeli ruling powers to push us out as Palestinians. What we saw, or what is the main lesson understood from this ongoing genocide and from this moment, that whatever the outcome might be, however this ends, Israelis need to stop having any control over Palestinians. And this kind of control cannot stop on its own. It needs massive international intervention. What has been proven is that the voice of reason, the voice of justice, is not listened to. Unfortunately, not in Israel, and not also, unfortunately, in the US administration. So, what is needed at this moment, what we pushed for as civil society, we came to the conclusion to call for international protection. Although this call is new in this context, but it's not new historically to us. There have been different calls for protection of Palestinian civilians. Back, for example, in 1991, when when a massacre was committed against 7 Palestinians, this was even before the Oslo Accords. Palestinian civil society went on hunger strike in the Red Cross in Jerusalem. About 14 activists, leaders of Palestinian civil society, went on a 14-day hunger strike, calling for the Security Council and the UN to issue a statement to put focus and calling for international protection. And they stopped their hunger strike once there was a statement from the UN, United Nations, that called for investigations and brought attention to the issue. So having to fight even as Palestinians to bring attention to our issue, to our causes, to our suffering is not even new to us. What we are hoping to achieve at this moment is that the free nations of the world, the people that have conscience, that they can come together and push for an international protective force. We don't want any, as Palestinians, and I can say this as civil society, as a Palestinian that has suffered under occupation and that is still subjected to different measures from the Israeli occupation. We don't want any more single soul to be killed. We don't want any more loss of life. What we want, and I quote here also Professor Sachs, is an international force that would come in and would put a stop to all of this bloodshed, put a stop for the dehumanization of Palestinians that's happening. And in this regard, what we see as imperative also is to bring Israel and the Israeli government to the same standards that any other nation around the world, any other government is being brought to. The same standards of the need to respect for human rights, the need to adhere to international law and international humanitarian law, and need to stop illegal actions such as annexations, settlement building, ethnic cleansing of Palestinian communities, and of course, I would say, even the discriminatory actions against even Palestinians that are citizens of the state of Israel. So these kinds of actions that as Palestinian civil society we call for, we don't call for war, we call for peace, but we understand that there can never be peace without justice. Unfortunately, the Saudi French proposal that proposes a stabilization force does not reflect this spirit, does not reflect a spirit that Palestinians are at the essence human beings and deserve to have their lives, their property, their future protected. Thank you for this, and thank you also for all of this organizing, for Dr. Stein, Craig, everyone here on this panel that is raising their voice for peace and justice in Palestine.
Thank you so much, Ubay. Thank you for your leadership and, our sincere sorrow and condolences that all of this has been inflicted on the people of Palestine for so long, as you say, long before 2023, long before, in fact, the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem. This really was, in fact, the game plan from the very start, and that's well documented by historians right now. So we are with you all the way. We really appreciate your leadership, and we'll be doing all that we can to help lift up your message. And in that regard, I just want to mention September 18th, when Pingo will be organizing a day of action, a global day of action, in fact, and there will be, as I understand, a rally and a demonstration and more, but particularly at the UN, hopefully around the world, but including in New York City, and we'll be helping to promote your, your plans, and we're very excited to collaborate on that as much as we possibly can. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Let's see. So I believe our schedule is being juggled here a little bit in real time. I next want to get on Dr. Omar Suleiman, who we are also very honored to have with us today, and he has another commitment and needs to be leaving soon, so I want to be sure to get him on now, as we promised. And he has been dedicated to building bridges across humanity, serving the Muslim community, and advocating for justice. He is the founding director of Muhsin, a nonprofit supporting individuals and families with special needs and promoting greater inclusion in Muslim spaces. He also serves as an adjunct professor of Islamic studies at the Southern Methodist University and is the founder and president of the Yaqeen Institute for Islamic Research, and where they focus on addressing doubts, strengthening faith, and inspiring positive Muslim contribution and impact. Thank you again so very much, Dr. Omar Suleiman. Take it away.
Thank you for having me. Bismillah ar-Rahman, in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. I want to pick up where we left off, talking about this idea of the ongoing Nakba. I remember a couple of months into the genocide, speaking to someone that works at one of these big tech social media companies, and he was talking about how, the initial idea of shadow banning was that we have a filter percentage that once we reach a certain threshold of pro-Palestinian posts, then we know to shadow ban this much, we know to diminish it by this much, and it's actually numerical, right? So we would increase it from 25% to 45%. Then if we saw the flood proportionately getting too much for us to be able to handle that online awareness, then we would increase it up to 60, 65%. And the thinking was that this was just going to last for a month or two, and we could simply then reverse and go back to our initial filters, which are already detrimental to getting a pro-Palestinian voice that's out there. And then we could continue with business as usual, erasing Palestinian lives, erasing anything about Palestine from our social media site. That obviously proved to be a failure on their part, despite all of the shadow banning, despite all of the efforts to suffocate and to silence. We're seeing the globalizing of the pro-Palestinian movement. And it's important for us to not just prevent any attempt to neuter the Palestinian cause and to appropriate it and turn it into something that it wasn't, as we're seeing happening right now, but to also make it a point to say that prior to this genocide, there was apartheid. So while you're fighting over whether or not to call it genocide, there was an apartheid. And there was a Nakba, and this is an ongoing Nakba. So I actually want to respect and honor Obey in that regard, the idea of the ongoing Nakba, and saying that those that have been pushing for the full independence, the full liberation of Palestine for all of these years, some of you who are on this call right now, and I thank you and I salute you for what you have been doing in that space for all of these years, for all of these decades. That's what we need to build upon. And, I'm in Dallas, Texas right now. Some of you may remember when Colin Kaepernick first took a knee. At some point when they realized that the truth had become trend, they tried to appropriate it. And Mr. Jerry Jones here in Dallas also decided to take a knee, but in his way, right? Because at some point when the truth starts to trend, you have to find a way to appropriate it and to tell the story in a way that's not consequential to you, and that doesn't actually stop the forces of oppression that led to the protest in the first place. And I know that many of you are actually speaking at the ADC in a few weeks. And I posted this early on in the genocide. I know it's hard to see off the phone, but you can see this. This is an ad that my father had written. He was the head of the ADC chapter 40 years ago in New Orleans, Louisiana, for his local newspaper, for the Times-Picayune. And it read, Friday, December 16th, 1988, so almost 40 years ago, keep our money home, save the children. The Palestinian children are victims of soldiers' brutality. They're being beaten, shot, and tear gassed. Your tax dollars pay for the weapons which will kill and maim them. They're denied their basic right to live in peace, freedom, and security in their homeland. If you really care, then join us in sending a message to your elected representatives. No more American tax dollars to support arms being used against children. Support Palestinian independence. And it was a pledge paid for by ADC New Orleans chapter and Dr. Ahmed Suleiman, the co-chairman at the time. You could take this ad from 40 years ago, almost 4 decades ago, and you could still put it in the paper and it would still hold the exact same impact and truth. The only thing is that it's become that much more brutal and that much harder to ignore for any person with a shred of human dignity. The point is that it's important for us to actually build on work that's already been done, and not to take the trending moment and to replace all of the institutional work that's been done over the years. We had a wonderful conference this past weekend, the People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit. My message was a very simple message: protect our people. Let's not trade substance for symbol. Strengthen our spaces. Let's build the institutional spaces that we have here. Let's build the spine. Let's give it more definition. Let's generate a more impactful and meaningful response by overwhelming every system, socially, culturally, economically, politically, overwhelming the spaces, because we do have strength in numbers. By taking our outrage and turning it into organization, by taking our tears and turning them into tools, by using what we have in terms of a broad coalition, the broadest and most brilliant coalition that we've ever had, to speak about the ongoing story of the erasure of Palestine, and to demand substantive change, not symbolic, heedings to the work of obliterating us that's already been done and that continues to move forward. And then finally, to sustain our stories. We see the impact of one Hind Rajab. We cannot allow people to normalize seeing our children being picked up in pieces, seeing these gruesome images, and to move on with business as usual. And I'll say this, that what is happening this time, and what this lifeline for Palestine is, and what similar efforts are that are coming up now, are those demands for something that is meaningful, for something that's substantive, utilizing our power. If Israel was looking for global legitimacy because it felt like it won everything else except for symbolic legitimacy, we want to peel that back and not just, show its illegitimacy in the way that it's constructed itself and the way that it's conducted itself, but also that we do feel like this is not just a trend, but a turning point for us, that we have an opportunity now to channel the emotions, the raw emotion of people across the board towards something that is beyond meaningful, and that honors the legacy of the work that's been done for all of these years and for all these decades. And thank you to all of you who are working so brilliantly in academia and journalism, in your spaces, to do what you do. I'm just here to lend my voice and to say thank you, and to support this effort.
Thank you so much, Dr. Omar Suleiman, for your incredible words to turn our outrage into organization, our tears into tools, substance into symbolism, and to make this not a trend but a turning point. These are really wonderful words to live by. Thank you so much for bringing your wisdom to this gathering here. Next on our program, and I know your schedule is tight today. Thank you so much for making time to be with us, and we hope to continue this collaboration. Next on our schedule, I believe, is Susan Abulhawa. And then just a heads up, I know that Jeffrey Sachs also has a time constraint, and we'll put him on next after Susan. As many people know, Susan Abulhawa is a Palestinian-American writer, poet, and activist. She is best known for her international best-selling novel, Mornings in Jenin, and as the founder of Playgrounds for Palestine. Let's see, there was an updated bio here, but I'm not seeing it, so forgive me, Susan. And she's also the founder of this nonprofit supporting children's rights. So through literature and advocacy, she is amplifying Palestinian voices and struggles for justice. Thank you so much, Susan, for being with us today.
Thank you, Jill. Gaza has been described as a tragedy, as a humanitarian crisis, as a war, as self-defense, as protecting Western values. But Gaza is none of those things. Gaza is an ancient place where history has deposited millennia of stories and the roots of her indigenous Palestinian people and every civilization that has intersected at that literal crossroad of 3 continents. Gaza has been a high-functioning society with one of the highest concentrations of PhDs per capita in the world, and they did this against all odds, against a constant siege and unrelenting state terror. And today, Gaza is the site of a Holocaust, the Holocaust of our time, the place of a live-streamed extermination of an ancient people in an ancient land by foreign colonizers from all over the world who greedily and desperately want that land, and more importantly, who covet that ancient story of the indigenous people. Gaza is humanity's open wound, festering in plain view, with children pulled from the rubble, buried alive, burned alive, shredded, sniped, dismembered, for all the world to see. For all the world to scroll past, with hospitals bombed while diplomats craft excuses, with journalists, artists, intellectuals, and healthcare workers assassinated while media corporations run cover for their killers, with doctors kidnapped and raped systematically with no accountability. The so-called international community, with a handful of exceptions, at best whispers, and at worst, it arms, funds, and cheers what has become a human abattoir, an abattoir of children. Gaza is the most macabre experiment of empire. It is a test to see how far they can stretch our silence, how horribly they can abuse, rape, torture, dismember, an utterly defenseless people while we watch and then move on. And if they are not stopped now, nothing will stop them when they come to someone else's doorstep. Already there is a fleet on Venezuela's shores in the name of controlling drugs, as if the CIA weren't the biggest drug dealer in the world. Most of us on this panel are citizens of the United States. While the majority of Americans, according to multiple polls, oppose this genocide and want our government to end support for Israel's genocidal colonialism, the American government continues to supply the bombs, the bullets, the drones, the intelligence. It vetoes every attempt at accountability. It shields Israel while it commits the unspeakable. This genocide is carried out with our tax dollars by politicians who trade Palestinian blood and anguish for campaign checks, for political favor and defense contracts. We are asking peoples of the world to help us stop this. We are asking that those who profit from unfathomable death and horror be made to face the masses and face the blood on their own hands. Inaction is not neutrality. It is complicity. It is surrender. It is to hand over our humanity to a machine of death that will not stop with Gaza. As Colombian President Gustavo Petro warned, Gaza is a rehearsal for the future. What is done to Palestine today will be done to any nation that dares to resist empire tomorrow. This is not only about Gaza, not only about Palestine. This is about what it means to be human, what it means to be a citizen of whatever country you're in right now. To be a citizen is not to be an obedient subject. It is not to wave a flag or even to burn a flag. It is not to keep your head down to go shopping and vote. If you examine your country's greatest traditions, you will find that they were born from defiance and from solidarity, that they were born from challenging the corruption of the powerful. The best of us, the most noble impulses we possess as humans, spring from solidarity with one another, from compassion, and from speaking truth to power. Every moral leap in human history came not from those who marched in lockstep with the machinery of power, but from those who threw their bodies into the cogs of that machine. It came from those who refused to sell their conscience, those who refused to allow their moral compass to be broken. The greatest human traditions come not from blind allegiance, but from rebellion. To challenge corrupt authority is not betrayal. It is the greatest form of patriotism. It is fidelity to the highest ideals we claim to value. It was recently revealed that Tony Blair said that the genocide in Gaza is a once-in-a-century opportunity for commercial development. Israel sees it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Zionist expansion and theft of more resources. Donald Trump and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, see it as a prime real estate venture, complete with trillions of dollars in offshore gas fields. There is no doubt that Gaza is a pivotal point in human history. Indeed, if we allow them, if you, the countries listening now, if you allow them, someday they will be at your doorstep for your prime real estate, for someone else's expansionist ambitions and greedy commercial developments. If we stop them, however, and only if we stop them, humanity might have a chance at a moral future, where international law is not meaningless and can be applied to those who made the rules and thought they didn't have to follow them. There is a better, kinder, less anguished, less tortured, less frightening world for all of us. A world where dignity might be universal. But that light hinges on whether we act to save Palestine. It hinges on whether we act to foil this awful, inhuman, cruel experiment of empire. They want us to believe that we are powerless. They want us to drown in despair. They want us to think that nothing can be done, so they can go on making trillions from trampling our lives, from surveillance and their endless wars. We must not allow ourselves to be turned into spectators of mass murder while corporations and bankers and blackmailed pedophile politicians slaughter, rape, and mutilate their way through humanity, through life itself, in order to obtain real estate, offshore gas, and lucrative contracts. Frantz Fanon taught us that the shackles that bind us most tightly are not the weapons of the colonizers, but the chains in our own minds. The belief that nothing can be done, that resistance is futile. Fanon taught us that decolonization is not a gift bestowed from above, but a violent rupture, a collective uprising of the oppressed and their allies who refuse to kneel. We are running out of time. 2 years of unimaginable human slaughter, de-development, and ineffable trauma are threatening to end an ancient indigenous society that has lived continuously on that land for millennia. This is the naked colonialism that we all thought was behind us, resurrected now in full color, full sound, and high definition. No one can say they didn't know. Everyone knows. Silence is complicity in a profound darkness that will eventually swallow us all. And so I say to the politicians, to the lobbyists, to the arms dealers, to the media moguls who sanitize slaughter, you may have your power, you may have your wealth, but you do not have our obedience. We know our actions make us targets, but we cannot remain silent. I call on peoples of the world, and indeed nations and militaries of the world, do not sell your humanity for the safety and comfort that is fleeting, while we collectively watch unimaginable, horrific, and sadistic cruelty and violence unfold against the most vulnerable people on earth at this hour. What is at stake is not merely the survival of Gaza or Palestine, though that is urgent enough. What is at stake is the meaning of justice. What is at stake is the very essence of what it means to be human. If an entire people can be annihilated in broad daylight, if the world's most powerful nation can bankroll their extermination and no one resists, that humanity itself has collapsed. But if we rise, if we name this Holocaust for what it is, if we challenge the corruption of empire that feeds on our silence, then perhaps there is hope. Hope not just for Palestine, but for us all. The Uniting for Peace Resolution of 1950 was crafted precisely for such a moment, not as a measure of pity, but as a tool of collective power in the face of empire. Its invocation is long overdue, and I hope the world can muster the courage to save one another before it's too late, to unite in conscience and power, and in collaboration with the agency of Palestinians, particularly those enduring this genocide. And perhaps then history will record that in humanity's darkest hour, we refused to bow, that we shattered the paralysis of complicity, and that we forced the retreat of oligarchs, warlords, and sadists who think that the world and the future belong only to them. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Susan, for your profound and powerful words. Inaction is complicity. Gaza is a microcosm of empire, and we turn away at our peril. As Gaza goes, we all go. And this is all of our struggles. This is a turning point for humanity. And that's why we're here, to seize the empowerment that we do have. As you advise, we're not here to be told that we are irrelevant. No, we are the masters of our own fate here as humanity, and we are in Gaza together. Let's see. Next, we are going to bring on Jeffrey Sachs, who is known, I think, to just about everyone here. Dr. Sachs is a renowned American economist, professor, and author known for his incredible, fearless work on sustainable development, global health, economic policy, world events, U.S. events, you name it. He is director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, and he advises the UN and governments worldwide, advocating for peace, climate action, and equitable global cooperation. We are so grateful for your work, Dr. Sachs, in all of those capacities, and very grateful that you could squeeze in time with us today. So please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Jill. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you, Susan, for your eloquence, your call to our humanity. Thanks to everybody for mobilizing. I want to just add a few words about the diplomatic scene to give some suggestions of practical steps for all of us literally in the coming days, and as the world leaders come to the UN for the General Assembly this fall and for the UN summit on Palestine on September 22nd. The basic point is that the world is absolutely horrified by the startling genocide, the Holocaust that Israel is committing. We are not alone. This is the overwhelming reality of the world, of worldwide revulsion. It's revulsion everywhere. It's revulsion in the United States, in the U.S. Jewish community, I will add, in the worldwide community. What has happened, as everybody knows, but I think we should focus on it, is that Israel is being protected essentially and only, I would say, by the United States government. The United States government, as Susan said, is basically run by the CIA and by the military-industrial complex more generally. It has been nearly impervious to public opinion for a long time. It is brutal, it is violent, and it is in lockstep with Israel's genocide. This is not the case for the vast majority of the world. There have been several very important meetings. They don't seem important because they don't stop the genocide, but there have been several notable meetings in the last year at the United Nations where well over 180 countries said without doubt Palestine has its rights, its human rights, and also its political rights of self-determination by overwhelming majorities in countries with well over 90% of the world population. And of course, the International Court of Justice ruled last year that Israel's occupation of the 1967 war in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem is completely in violation of international law, and it gave the UN General Assembly 1 year to implement a solution and for Israel to leave this occupation. So that is the ICJ ruling. On July 29th, there was a meeting at the UN where all parties except the United States issued a declaration. They called it the New York Declaration, saying that the two-state solution must be implemented according to the International Court of Justice. The murder must stop. The Holocaust must stop. Of course, the United States continued to arm, finance, protect, and kill the Palestinians alongside Israel. This is completely a complicity in genocide. This is not only an Israel genocide, it's a U.S.-Israel genocide. It's our companies, it's our government, it's our military, it's our CIA. They're all doing the killing. It's not only Israel, it's the U.S. and Israel together. So this is a joint complicity in genocide. But the U.S. stands essentially alone. I'm not saying others are brave, many are not, but the U.S. stands essentially alone. And when Palestinian membership in the UN General Assembly, in the UN, came up at the UN Security Council last year, one vote and one vote only stopped it, and that is the U.S. veto. So it's in that context that I just want to make a few quick suggestions. First, Turkey has broken all economic, trade, transport, financial relations with Israel. Every country in the world should be encouraged to do the same. That doesn't depend on the U.S. That can't be vetoed by the U.S. That can't be stopped by the U.S. This is something every country should do as long as this genocide continues. This is straightforward. It's not complicated. When a country is committing genocide, it stands outside of humanity, period. And that means outside of the world economy also. Turkey shows you don't need the U.S. permission. You can stop all economic, financial, trade, transport, air route connections. So this is something that can be done, no U.S. veto. Second, we should do everything we can in our global network that when every one of the 193 UN member states shows up in a couple of weeks, that all of them, the US, let's put aside for one moment, all the rest recognize the state of Palestine. The US cannot veto that. This will happen probably with dozens of countries. We should be working on that. This should be the worldwide recognition of the state of Palestine. It doesn't admit them to the UN because the US has a veto on that. That's how it works in the UN Security Council. But it does work for reality. And it does work for establishing unequivocally there is a state of Palestine, whatever Israel says about it, it is not going away. That's number two. Third, we should be doing everything we can for the Arab countries that signed the Abraham Accords to suspend those accords, if not end them definitively. Morocco, UAE, Bahrain. This is horrendous that this so-called accord continues. These countries continue to recognize Israel in the context of a genocide. They need to, at a minimum, suspend diplomatic recognition. The UAE said that the recent call of Israel that it would annex the West Bank was a red line that would call into question the Abraham Accords. I think a genocide calls into question the Abraham Accords. I don't think it has to wait for the question of annexation. These accords have shown to be shambolic. So I think we should call on all of those countries, again, not subject to US veto, to end that. Fourth, as we've discussed and as Craig noted, by a vote of 2/3 of countries present and voting, Israel's credentials at the UN could be suspended and should be suspended. This was done with apartheid South Africa. I would say it should be done with genocidal Israel. So this is, again, something that the US cannot veto. This is very important. Fifth, of course, we should call on all UN member states immediately to stop all of their tech companies that are exporting murder. That includes Microsoft, that includes Palantir, and that includes many other tech companies, especially US companies, that are utterly complicit in mass murder. It's not a close call. It's a very explicit call. They're doing the web services and the AI for Israeli tracking of who to murder. This is not complicated. This is actually quite straightforward. And sixth, we've already heard from Craig brilliantly and beautifully, and his advocacy is so important about the protection force. So I just want to add without saying more about that. The final point I want to add is that not only can we have countries take actions independent of a US veto, not only can we have all countries in the world other than the United States recognize the state of Palestine in 2 weeks, not only can we use the UNGA, Uniting for Peace, and other mechanisms to take action that are not subject to a US veto, we also, those of us in the United States, need to use politics inside the US. We have the overwhelming majority of Americans on side with the Palestinian people. The overwhelming majority of Americans want the US government to recognize the state of Palestine. The overwhelming majority of Americans want this genocide to stop. Who knows? Maybe but for the Epstein files, it would have happened a long time ago. We can't really understand the full depravity of the US government, but it has nothing to do with democracy. So thank you very much. Let's do everything we can where the US can't stop it, and then do everything we can to stop our US government from its genocide, because it is completely a partner with Israel in this genocide. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And I think you speak to the particulars right here and now, what we can do, and also the longer struggle that this is a part of. Gaza is a microcosm of the abuses of US empire, and it's not a simple struggle, but let's be clear, US empire is in a collapse right now. It may be a slow motion collapse, but it is an economic, a diplomatic, a political, and an environmental, a social collapse in every way imaginable. So people need to recognize that we are winning this battle on so many fronts, including the court of public opinion. This is fundamentally about reestablishing a democracy
It is.
founded on human rights and including international law and diplomacy. So this is a struggle we very much need to have, and Gaza is really the first really critical, absolutely do or die phase of this struggle. And thank you, Jeff, for your incredible leadership, and really appreciate your words, which I'm going to wrap up into our PowerPoint file to be sure that we've collected many of these, points of action right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for making time in your very crowded day.
Of course, of course.
Thanks so much. So next, we're going to bring on another guest that we are very privileged to have with us today. This is Ali Abunimah, who everyone is quite familiar with as well. A renowned Palestinian American journalist, author, and co-founder of the Electronic Intifada, a leading independent publication on Palestine. And Ali is a prominent voice, a resounding voice on behalf of Palestinian rights, equality, a one-state solution, and he's authored influential works, including One Country and the Battle for Justice in Palestine. We're so honored to have you with us today, Ali. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jill Stein, and to Mark Alborno, and to everyone who helped bring us all together today, to Craig Mokhiber as well, for your leadership in this initiative. We need to be taking every possible initiative to bring an end to this genocide. And those who've come before me, spoken before me, have made it easy because they've said many of the difficult things, and they've said it with such eloquence. So what I want to add to this is really to say, well, first of all, I returned to the United States last night from Ireland, where I had a chance once again to meet some of the students who'd been evacuated there with the assistance of the Irish government, but primarily through the efforts of volunteers, both in Ireland and around the world. And meeting them was a privilege, but it was also a reminder of the unbearable, unspeakable horror that they have survived, and the bitter reality of having to leave their families behind in a Holocaust, not knowing if they will ever see them again. And while we celebrated and cried together for their safety, we have to give that sense of safety to every single person in Gaza. That my visit to Ireland reinforced that for me very much. It's probably no secret, but I have never held much belief in the United Nations. That's not to say that it doesn't have technical agencies that perform crucial tasks, particularly with respect to health and nutrition and other aviation and other basic functions. But as a political body, as a body of enforcing international law, I've never had much hope in it, and I have even less today. So why would I support an initiative like this? I hope to answer that. But let me say that I think we have to start by recognizing that the United Nations is at its weakest and most wretched ever, and that we have the worst, absolutely worst Secretary General in history, and that's saying something. Antonio Guterres is absolutely complicit in this genocide. He has relentlessly endorsed Israel's lies about October 7th. He has used UN bodies and agencies to promote Israel's atrocity propaganda, its hoax about rapes on October 7th, in order to further this genocide, in order to give legitimacy to the mass slaughter which Israel is carrying out in the name of these lies. And he must be held accountable for that, as must any other UN officials who are misusing the organs of this agency to spread Israel's atrocity propaganda and lies. And look what has happened just in the past week when Marco Rubio, decided that the Palestinian Authority leaders would not be allowed to address the General Assembly in New York. This is not a forum for me to talk about my feelings about the collaborationist Palestinian Authority, and I certainly won't miss them coming to New York. But it is important to talk about the sovereignty of the United Nations, and many have recalled that in 1988, when the United States denied a visa to Yasser Arafat to address the General Assembly, the entire General Assembly voted to pick up and move to Geneva in order to express its sovereignty and the fact that no single member state will dictate to it. Well, this time around, I haven't even found a statement from Antonio Guterres condemning the United States for violating its headquarters treaty and vetoing which world leaders can attend the United Nations or not. So this is a total abdication of his duty and of the sovereignty of the United Nations. So now the United Nations is subordinate, you could call it an appendage or a bureau of the State Department run by Marco Rubio, because Marco Rubio can now decide who is allowed to attend the United Nations. So that is absolutely shameful. It's been pointed out that this 12-month deadline that the General Assembly gave to Israel is just about up within a few days. And France, Germany, Britain, the usual genocidal suspects, are trying to divert all the energy and attention into a ridiculous conference for a so-called two-state solution, whose purpose is not to save the Palestinians from this Holocaust, but to save the perpetrator as a so-called racist Jewish state. That only by partition can they rescue an entity with a Jewish majority whose right, so-called right to exist as a Jewish state, can be protected even by a Holocaust, as we see now. While this all energy put into this effort is valuable, and I hope it will succeed, and I hope it will be a contribution to ending this genocide, no state has an excuse not to act. With respect to Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, who I always listen to with great attention and learn so much from him, I have to say with great disappointment that Turkey did not, in fact, cut off all transport and trade links with Israel. Its announcement last week initially gave us that impression, but it was later clarified by Turkish authorities that they were only closing their airspace to Israeli government planes and Israeli planes carrying weapons, not to commercial transport. That continues. And the same seems to be the case with shipping. And most of the oil and fuel that fuels Israel's warplanes that are murdering and massacring dozens of people a day in Gaza flows from Azerbaijan through a pipeline across Turkish territory, and that has to stop. So this initiative is really a final test for the United Nations as to whether it can be a body that expresses and implements the will of humanity, which is overwhelmingly disgusted and revolted by this genocide, or whether the United Nations and its top officials will continue to be servants of the State Department, servants of the genocidal state of Israel, and whether tyrannical regimes and European colonizers will continue to set the agenda for the whole world and for Palestine. Palestine has a right to resist. The Palestinian people have a right to resist, to fight for their freedom against this evil of Zionism backed by Western barbarism and its local Arab and other tyrants. And all efforts to rally humanity against this evil and to end it and to end this Zionist colonization of Palestine deserve all our support. Thanks to everyone. I encourage all of you to continue to go out, to continue speaking about Gaza, to continue shouting from the rooftops, not just to stop the genocide, that's the most urgent task, but to punish all of those who are involved in it. That is not me being vengeful. That is international law. The Genocide Convention says that every signatory undertakes to prevent and punish genocide. And the list of those who need to be punished for these unspeakable crimes is a long one. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe you're muted.
Okay. Thank you so very much, Ali, for your very powerful words as usual. And I think you really described the stakes at Gaza. This is not just about Gaza. This is about whether we abide by human rights and the laws of nations. And if not that, what's the alternative? It's the law of the jungle. And the US is the hegemon today, but not for very much longer. So, we absolutely, as many speakers have said, Gaza is our future. And we need to, fight for justice in Palestine like our lives depend on it, all of our lives. And ultimately they do. And thank you very much for being here, for your inspiration. And it does feel like, we are, so many of us, I think, have come from a place of great skepticism about the UN. And what is different here is the fact that there is this unique moment to do an end run around the usual shameful stranglehold that the US has over that whole process. And I'll just say it's my feeling that whether we win or not, it benefits civil society and humanity to be working together on behalf of Palestinian rights and human rights and international law. The struggle is going to serve us all, regardless of the outcome. And we may not succeed right now, but there's no way that we can go forward under the terms of power that we currently live by. The US empire is in a slow motion collapse and attempting to take the rest of the world down with it. So this is a battle that we very much are fully engaged in. And thanks to you for putting it so strongly. And thank you to everyone else who's here. So with that, let's see, in our juggling order here, I think, is it Reverend Munther Isaac who is going to be next?
No, Doctor, it will be Roger Washington.
Okay, all right. So our next guest, we are extremely honored to have with us just a profound and hallowed legend in his own time, as much for his music and art as for his advocacy as a human rights defender, a fearless one who is much under attack, as most of the members of this panel are or have been. Roger Waters is very much a defender of rights and justice for all of us. We are so honored to have him here. He is co-founder, as you may know, of the legendary rock band Pink Floyd, a musician, songwriter, and activist known for his powerful critiques of war, injustice, and oppression. Beyond his iconic music, he advocates for Palestinian rights, speaks out fearlessly against global militarism, and uses art as a very profound force for human rights and freedom. And we're going to be honored both by Roger Waters here live and by a work of art that he has prepared for this occasion. So take it away, Roger. Thank you so very much.
Not at all, Jill. Thank you so much for having me here. I've followed most of the people on this panel for quite some time. Susie, it's great to see you again. I've listened, and Ali, and blah, 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 and all the rest of you, Jeffrey, and Craig. I've listened to your eloquence and your passion on this subject for years, and also listened to it all today. Craig I haven't known for very long, but he is the one who educated me on the Uniting for Peace possibilities that go back, as he's already told us, to November 1950, when Uniting for Peace was first evoked during the Korean conflict, I believe, and then again, in Suez. So I won't bang on. I'm so happy to be here, and on Wednesday, before I knew I was going to be doing this, I try and do one thing every day. And on Wednesday of this week, I thought, I know, I'll make a little piece about the upcoming Uniting for Peace emergency session of the General Assembly in a couple of weeks' time. So I started to do that, and I got a bit carried away. And we're gonna show you what I made in a minute, as Jill said. And so it turned into a little piece of theatre, I suppose. And I don't want to make a longer speech than this, but I would like you to listen to the way there's a couple of little bits of my music, and also whatever small contribution it is that I can make to encourage all our brothers and sisters all over the world to be there. Okay, in 2 weeks' time on the 18th of September, wherever you are in the world, be there for that emergency session in the United Nations General Assembly, because it is fundamentally important to all of us. That's kind of it, Jill. So, roll the tape, and thank you so much for having me here today.
Just one moment,
Thank you.
Mr. Rogers. Thank you.
The voice had been there all along, hidden in the stones in the rivers, hidden in all the books, hidden in plain sight. It was the voice of reason.
Okay, this is a message from the voice of reason. For the purposes of today, I will be the voice of reason. Okay? We are heading for the rocks. We need to turn this ship around. In 1860, the voice of reason said to the slavers, "You can avoid a civil war and 600,000 dead, but you'll have to give up slavery." The response to the voice of reason by the slavers was, "F you, N-word." The rest is history. It did not go well and is still not sorted. The USA is still a country crippled by the perceived manifest destiny of white Europeans to invade new worlds, murder indigenous people, and plunder the land. That was then, 1860. In 2025, the voice of reason is saying to Israel and the United States of America and all their acolytes, quote, "You can live in a peaceful world, but you'll have to give up your attachment to manifest destiny and occupation, including plunder of the land and the murder of the people." The response to the voice of reason now is F you. voice of reason. You are a lying, anti-Semitic, limey pinko. We rule the world. Joe Biden said so only last year. I love that. All right. So, page 2. Pay attention. I'm kidding. Hold on a minute. Oh, look, he's having a glass of wine. Well, it is after 7 o'clock. The sun is over the yard arm, even for the voice of reason. Ready? Here we go. Page 2. On the 29th of November 2012, the General Assembly voted almost unanimously to give Palestine the status of observer state. I know because I was there that day. I made a speech that day to the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations. It was a great day. It could have been the start of something good. But since that day, the veto of the United States of America in the Security Council has stood implacably in the way of the spread of universal human rights all over the world, but particularly in the Holy Land. We are heading for the rocks. But we, the people of the United Nations, need to fight back, and we can. There is a resolution on the books, Uniting for Peace, which was specifically designed to bypass the malign use of the power of veto in the Security Council, particularly when something manifestly evil is happening somewhere in the world. The genocide in Palestine now is manifestly evil. Looking forward, on September the 17th, that's in 2 weeks time from today, the United Nations General Assembly has the opportunity to bypass the veto of the United States of America and to vote, which it will, almost unanimously, on a Uniting for Peace resolution requiring the end of the Israeli occupation of East Jerusalem and all other occupied Palestinian territories. This resolution will authorize the sending of armed United Nations blue helmet peacekeepers into occupied Palestine and the eviction of the occupying Israeli Defense Forces, which have been plundering the land and are committing the ongoing genocide of the indigenous people. This is the evil of which we spoke before. If we, the people, accept this opportunity on the 17th of September 2025, that day will be forever remembered as the day when we, the people of the United Nations, saved not only our brothers and sisters in Palestine, but also, conceivably, all life on earth. We, the people, will have united in the spirit of Sumud. We, the people, will have united for peace. On September the 17th, 2025, when all our voices joined together in harmony, we, the united peoples of these United Nations, will have turned this ship around. Roll on the 17th of September. Be there. Be everywhere. We will turn this ship around. Love you.
And when all those new voices join us in harmony, standing shoulder to shoulder, from the river to the sea, people from every nation will hear that joyful sound. Ordinary people, just standing their ground. And together, these ordinary people, together, they will turn this ship around. Oh yeah. Together. Oh yeah. Together we will turn this ship around.
Audio.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Jill.
Thank you, Roger. I want to hear that song over and over and over, full-length version, couple-hour version of that song. Together we will turn this ship around.
Well, the song is called Sumud, which, as we all know here, is a word in Arabic that means steadfast perseverance, but specifically in this case, in resistance to the occupation of their homeland. And yeah, it's about 8 minutes long, the song, and I won't go into it anymore, but that's just the very end of it. So thank you for listening to it.
Thank you. Is this available now, that song?
It's sort of out there in social media land. You know, Randy Credico plays it on the bus when he's going home at night to the East Coast. So yeah, it's sort of out there a bit, but it's a work in progress. I haven't finished it yet. I still have to there's a big part for a choir, a chorus, or whatever. I like the idea of all the people of the world joining their voices in harmony and making such a loud noise that they persuade these MFs to stop following their ideas of manifest destiny, which are to plunder the whole world and murder everybody and rape everybody and steal anything of any value and take it home and put it and stuff it into Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg's and Elon Musk's pockets, and not to forget Donald Trump. and fill their pockets, and that's the only thing that they have any interest in. Well, that is not our manifest destiny. Our manifest destiny is to bring the voice of reason to the people of the world. And like as so eloquently all your speakers have been doing here today. So to have been allowed to contribute to that in some small way is a huge honor, and I thank you for that. And I'll let somebody else speak now. Thank you.
And just for people to know, a couple of today's speakers will also be on the webinar on Sunday, on September 7th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 p.m. Jerusalem and everything else in between. So feel free to join a second webinar if you are so moved. We will be covering other information as well. We hope to have some of our resources ready to review for people. At any rate, Roger will also be there as well. So thank you again, Roger, and we hope to continue lifting your very powerful voice. Thank you so much. And we look forward to making a link to that song available for everyone soon. So our next speaker is Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac, who I think everyone is familiar with as the very eloquent author of the Jesus in the Rubble sermon from Bethlehem that was so moving. He is a Palestinian Christian theologian, pastor of the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church in Bethlehem, an academic dean at the Bethlehem Bible College, and a leading advocate for justice and peace. He amplifies the Palestinian Christian witness, calling for equality, liberation, and an end to occupation through faith and action. Thank you so very much, Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks you for inviting me. I'm honored to be part of this amazing host of speakers, wonderful human beings. And as a Palestinian, I'm grateful for every voice on this panel. Find it interesting and amazing to follow also after Roger's powerful and colorful talk. And it's good to bring the pastor after this talk. We love you, Roger, for everything you're doing. I will be bringing my perspective as a man of faith from Palestine, currently residing in Ramallah. And allow me to begin by quoting the Bible: "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." We gather at one of the darkest moments in our shared human history. Genocide is unfolding in Gaza, live streamed for the world to see. Children starve in real time, and families are buried under rubble. And to deny this is not to assault the truth only, it's to assault our humanity as Palestinians and our moral conscience. But Gaza is not only a tragedy, it is the test of our generation. I feel we have all failed the people of Gaza, we have all failed the children of Gaza, which means we need to do more. And that's why I'm grateful for such an initiative. So we must stand together because it's time to act, and it's time to act strategically. We must stand together across faiths, across traditions, and build alliances rooted in justice and love. We must prioritize the voices and lives of the vulnerable. We must speak as people of faith when the world dehumanizes, starves, and bombs with immunity. And let's remember that what's happening in Gaza is not isolated. It is a warning to the world. If law means nothing, and if truth is silent, if genocide live streamed and is normalized, then no one is safe. None of us is safe. Gaza reveals the moral failure of our global system. That's why I said it is the moral compass of our world today. And as people of faith, we must respond, because if not us, then who? And in faith circles, in religious circles, charity is always the go-to thing. And yes, charity is necessary, but it's not enough. The time has come to speak truth to power and to act. And so we cannot remain paralyzed by grief or fear. And initiatives like this one, like this emergency global mobilizations, are one of the most important and strategic options we have right now, because such initiatives give us a coordinated global voice at this critical moment. And so I'm grateful to this, and I urge people to join, organize, and mobilize towards this as well. As have been said repeatedly, silence will be counted as complicity. And as a man of faith, I again must insist that I still believe in prayer as long as it's coupled with action. So I urge people to continue to make Gaza visible everywhere, whether in vigils, in prayers, in public gatherings. We need to keep talking about Gaza. We need to keep Gaza in our churches, mosques, and synagogues, in every sermon, in every prayer, in every meeting. We cannot stop talking about Gaza, and we cannot stop praying about it. And so our prayers must guide our action. Prayer is not a sustainer, it's a substitute for action. Prayer is the fire that should drive us into the streets, into the offices of decision makers, into the public square demanding justice. And let me address what will happen in the UN this September, because I feel September could be a pivotal month in our humanity as it pertains to the role of the UN can play. And yes, it is not perfect. I agree with those who have said that, but it is what we have today. It's a mean that exists. And so we must tell the world that this could be the last opportunity to save what remains of the fragile international system, a system that has already failed Palestinians and Gazans again and again. But if this moment passes without decisive action, then the future is one of lawlessness, where might is right, where the powerful act without restraint, and where genocide can be live streamed without consequences. And I repeat, as people of faith, we must be the first to speak up, because silence in such a moment is not just neutrality, it is betrayal. The stakes are not only on Gaza's survival, but they are the survival of a moral order in the world. I would like to finally emphasize the importance of holding people accountable. Justice demands more than just words. We must act in ways that make perpetrators feel the consequences of their crimes. Tragically today, genocide committers are normalized. We must isolate Israel politically, economically, and culturally until it abides by international law. We must take those responsible for war crimes to court and pursue them wherever they are honored or welcomed. We must cut the flow of weapons to those who use them against the civilians. And we must stand firmly against any attempts to shield leaders from accountability. And we must also defend those who demand these things. And friends, please understand, this is not vengeance. This is the minimum standard of justice in a world that claims to value human lives. And so we must say it clearly, such actions, when we talk about BDS, this is a moral and ethical, non-violent tool to resist the evil of apartheid, and more importantly today, to stop this genocide. It's about our faith. As people of faith, we must not only pray for peace, we must help dismantle the very same systems that prevent peace. So I repeat, this is a faith position. It is a moral and ethical choice. And so in closing, yes, I repeat, we must continue to pray and give, but also we must pray with our feet and hands, because faith without works is dead. The time to act is now. We have an opportunity. Gaza's children cannot wait, and the moral soul of our world cannot survive another failure. And we do have the power. Thank you, Dr. Stein, for reminding us of this. As a global community, we are one human family. And I learned this from South Africa when I visited, and we kept saying Amandla, power to the people. Let us remember, together we ended apartheid in South Africa, and together we can end the genocide and apartheid in Palestine. The same courage, the same solidarity, the same unshakable belief in justice that brought freedom to one land can bring freedom to another. So let us rise to this moment, united, determined, and unafraid. May we not be overcome by evil, but may we all overcome evil with good. And may history record that when Gaza cried out, we did not look away. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Reverend Munther Isaac, for your very powerful words. Every one of them. This is the last opportunity to act to save the fragile international system. As it goes, we all go. Thank you. We're so honored to have your guidance and your wisdom with us today and going forward. We thank you and very much look forward to continuing to elevate your voice along with other Palestinian voices. We will turn now to, and I want to acknowledge how late it is in Jerusalem right now. I think it is, the sun is probably coming up. Maybe the sun is already up. So thank you so very much, Dr. Reverend Isaac, for your extraordinary actions. And this is the least of them. Thank you very much. I want to also just note that someone posted in at least the chat that I'm seeing that Roger Waters' song, The Global Samud, is on, it is on YouTube. And there is a link that maybe people in our back room there can get posted as widely as it can go. But if you need to Google it, it's Roger Waters' Samud. And you can search that on YouTube. It went up a month ago. And so at least you can hear what there is. Maybe it's the bootlegged version, which will be, invaluable someday. I think it already is invaluable. So you can go ahead and check that out. There's one more speaker, if my list is correct here. And it's so important. I've purposely delayed her voice till the last because if anyone... Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Miko, before...
Oh, yes. All right. Our shifting lists. Okay, so we're going to put Miko on next, and Medea Benjamin will be after Miko. And Miko, I think everyone is familiar with as well. Miko Peled is an Israeli-American activist, author, profound speaker, committed to Palestinian rights and equality. He has an amazing personal story. Growing up as the son of an Israeli general, he advocates for a single democratic state with justice for all. His own process of transition from raised within Zionism to one of the most powerful anti-Zionist proponents, who's a proponent for humanity and against ethno-racism of any variety. Miko just speaks with very profound experience of apartheid and genocide, having grown up in that system. His books, The General's Son and Injustice, highlight occupation, apartheid, and the struggle for human rights, both very profound books. So I turn it over to you, Miko. It's such an honor. I know that you are completely spread thin right now doing your work, especially with the Palestine House of Freedom that Miko has established in Washington, D.C. to give voice right there in the halls of power to the Palestinian human rights movement. So thank you, Miko, for your incredibly powerful and impactful work.
Thank you. Thanks for that generous introduction. Thank you for including me in this fantastic webinar. And it's been inspiring to hear all the speakers that came before me. I don't think there's any question that the single most important thing right now is the protection of the Palestinian people. And it's interesting that over all the years that Palestinians have been suffering from Zionist terrorism, the issue of guaranteeing the safety and security of Palestinians has, I don't know if it's ever come up, rarely, if at all. And that has always been the single most important issue. I don't want to sound negative, but we're 77 years late. This conversation should have been taking place 77 or 80 years ago. Because right now, things have come to a point where they're so severe that it seems almost impossible to make a change. And I would never tell anyone not to try something, because I think all our efforts are important and valuable. But I do agree with my friend Alia that I have very little faith in the UN and its ability to act. But you never know. So I think we should continue the effort. This is a good effort, but I have very, very little faith in that. I think we often underestimate how well planned the genocide of the Palestinian people has been by the Zionists. There seems to have been, up until now, and even now in some spaces, the determination, the planning, the execution, be it through legal means within the occupation, the apartheid state, or just by policy, or just by practice, this genocide has been developing. I think we often forget that 3 years after the end of the Nazi regime and the Holocaust, the genocide of the Palestinian people commenced, and the world allowed it to happen. It's 3 years. Those were the years where crimes against humanity and the crime of genocide and all of these things were developed and discussed and accepted, and yet completely ignored when it came to Palestinians. And again, I'll say that was the time to have this conversation. Of course, many of us were not born yet at that time. The source, or I'll say the strategic thinking of the Zionists from the very beginning pointed to what we're seeing now in the Gaza death camp. There can be no question that what happened in the beginning, 77, 78, 80 years ago in Palestine, and what is happening now, there's a direct link. It's all part of a single strategy that has been executed, I hate to say it, brilliantly. And the Zionists have learned from all the other struggles, the struggles that succeeded, how to fortify themselves and make sure that the Palestinian struggle fails. And again, I hate to say this, but they succeeded. The only time that there was a real threat to the Zionist state, that the entire system was paralyzed, was on October the 7th of 2023. That was the first time the entire apartheid state was paralyzed. And it's still suffering from that paralysis. They have not recovered. And I think, again, the mistake that's been made, or maybe it was not a mistake, or maybe it was by design, is that this strategy was ignored. I mean, the Zionists have never hidden their purpose. They have never hidden their objectives of the destruction of Palestine and the destruction of the Palestinian people. I mean, they changed the name of the country, for crying out loud. They expelled close to 1 million people right away and called it the War of Independence. What would anybody expect would happen next? Peace and love and prosperity? It's absurd. So I'll say it again. What we're seeing now in Gaza is a direct result of the fact that the Zionists were allowed to do what they did in Palestine 77 years ago. I listen and I read the Hebrew news quite often, as disgusting as it is. And all the horrors that we list, all the terrible, the description of this unbelievably horrific reality that is taking place in the Gaza death camp right now, they're being heralded as accomplishments. They're being discussed with pride. They cheer when they see and they discuss the things that we, barely have the words to describe because they're so horrible, because they're so cruel, because they're so unbelievably, I don't even know what to call it. This brutal, savage massacre of so many people. And speaking of the United Nations, I think it was the United Nations in 2016 or 17, there was a report that said that by 2020, Gaza would be unfit for living by 2020. Now, I think it's also important for all of us to remember that Palestinians have been living under a reign of terror for 77 years. All of Palestine has been under a reign of terror for 77 years. I'd invite people to actually, when talking about Palestine, remember that the name of the country is Palestine, the name of the regime is Israel. Israel is an apartheid regime. And people often will say Palestine, Israel, Israel, Palestine, as though there's symmetry there. And by the way, that symmetry started with the United Nations with a partition plan, where they pretended like there's some kind of a symmetry between the Palestinians, whose land this is, and these violent settlers who came to take it. I have this map behind me, the map of Palestine, and you see the Naqab, the southern part seems empty. And this is typical of a lot of maps of Palestine. The Naqab is home to some 300,000 Palestinian Bedouin. They live under a reign of terror. Even this was created by a Palestinian. The Naqab is full of towns and villages and so forth. Doesn't exist. Not to mention, the horrors that Palestinians have to go through in Jerusalem, in Lid, in Jaffa, in every city throughout all of Palestine, every city and town, what they call the mixed cities, the racism, the segregation, the apartheid is so horrific. And it worries me because very often people fall back on this two-state solution, even when they don't talk about the two-state solution, because they always refer to Gaza and the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Gaza Strip is the West Bank, or the occupation of 1967. We have to make sure that we talk about all of Palestine. Every Palestinian in Palestine needs our protection because they could be killed, children can be killed, and they are being killed. They're being dispossessed on a regular basis throughout the entire country, and they've been living under a reign of terror for 77 years. So the land remains Palestine. It's always been Palestine. It will continue to be Palestine. This regime is a dark chapter in the long history of Palestine, and it's on us to bring it to an end as quickly as possible. But like I said, now that this regime is so entrenched, has got so much support, has rooted itself in this country and other countries, so that every aspect almost of life in this country, education, media, culture, and so on, has Zionist roots in it. Now try to rip this out is a much tougher challenge. And of course, we're all horrified by what is taking place in the Gaza death camp. I think although we all want to see peace and so forth, we're dealing with a monstrosity. And I think the word peace needs to be replaced with liberation. The objective has to be liberation, the liberation of Palestine, the liberation of the Palestinian people. Yes, one day, hopefully, after liberation, we all hope that there will be peace, that people will have to live a normal life, but liberation and justice and return. Those are the terms that I think we need to be pushing nonstop. The United Nations wants to see peace. They need to do everything they can. And all of us need to push them so that the liberation of Palestine is the issue. I don't believe for one second that United Nations forces will enter Palestine, certainly not in the near future. But everything around that, besides that, needs to be pushed. Sanctions, boycotts, the stopping of, holding, not allowing Israeli ships to port, to stop at different ports around the world, and so on and so forth. This is the power that we do have, and that really is what needs to happen. The legacy of Palestinian voices, the legacy of Palestinian voices throughout the last 100 years needs to be revived. That's actually something we're working on here at Palestine House of Freedom, to create some kind of a curriculum that digs into these voices that talked about liberation, the liberation of all of Palestine, before the call for liberation, began kind of thinning out and being diluted to the point that we had Oslo and now we have the Palestinian Authority. But originally, liberation also meant a free Palestine with equal rights. And I think we all have to go back to that. We have to go back to square one. And like I said, we didn't have this conversation 77 years ago. Now that we're having it, we need to go back to square one and talk about liberation. Somebody mentioned allegiance. I think our allegiance needs to be to the Palestinian people and to a liberated Palestine. That should be our allegiance. And so to speak very clearly about the right to resist, to support the Palestinian resistance, to support the Palestinian fight for liberation throughout all of Palestine, because as I'm sure many, if not all of you know, there are Palestinian voices throughout all of Palestine who are struggling and calling for the liberation of Palestine and working extremely hard in all the different means that they have at their disposal. But our allegiance needs to be to that, to a liberated Palestine, with a Palestinian flag, with a real free Palestine from the river to the sea. And I want to say one more thing, this about the recognition of a Palestinian state. So far, what that meant was the governments that are complicit trying to calm their constituents by saying, look, we did something, we recognized the Palestinian state, which of course has not helped a single Palestinian. I think the recognition has to be that we must all fight for a liberated Palestine on all of historic Palestine. That should be the recognition, that the apartheid state has got to go and be replaced by a free Palestine from the river to the sea. That has to be the recognition. If countries around the world, if the United Nations wanted to really have an impact, that should be the call, because the recognition of a Palestinian state validates, I think, the Palestinian Authority, the whole Oslo thing, the two-state solutions thing, and it just brings it back to that. There is no Palestinian state because Palestine has been occupied for the better part of the last 8 decades, and that needs to end. The apartheid regime has got to go. A free, liberated Palestine, a liberated Palestinian people have to be our priority. And then, of course, mechanisms to allow for the return of Palestinians to their lands and to their homes. So I'll say what I said at the beginning. I think every effort like this, of course, is fantastic. Seeing all these incredible people speaking, it was wonderful and extremely, extremely important. I would just wish that this conversation had taken place many, many decades ago. And once again, let's make the liberation of Palestine the focus, as opposed to things that I believe Imam Omar Suleiman said, replace symbolism with actual things that matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Miko. Thank you for your very clear voice. And you have been consistent for as long as I've been hearing you. You've been really ahead of the curve and very much in the target hairs for being the voice that you are as an Israeli by birth, not by choice, and someone who has graduated to being a citizen of the greater state of liberated Palestine. So you have certainly been in the target hairs for your very clear message. Thank you so much for your courage. And I've learned so much listening to you over the years. Thank you for that. We are running over here, and I apologize for that, but all of our speakers have been so powerful. I really did not want to limit anybody's words. The next speaker is our last, and I very much wanted her to be the last because this is the challenge before all of us right now. How do we translate this momentum, this global call, for an emergency global call for an end to the genocide now? How do we do that? You know, what we've been trying to say in this webinar is that we do have the power, but we have to use that power. And we have to use that power in all the ways, powerful and critical ways that everyone is doing. But now we have to do more. We have to really focus in and ratchet up the pressure on our voices in the UN. Granted, of course, this is a leap of faith, but we will be stronger for it. However it comes out, we will be a more unified and powerful force of civil society. And Medea spends just about every day that I have known her hammering away at the the visible arbiters of power and really lifting our voice and our small d democracy influence. We are supposed to instruct the people who represent us, not the other way around. So Medea, I would love for you to share some of your strategies and your thoughts about how do we make ourselves felt as an emergency mobilization of civil society that demands that our UN representatives and the governments instructing them actually hold the line for Palestine, and that we try to move those who are movable to cross the line, and come to the aid of Palestine. So take it away, Medea. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jill and Mark and those who put together this extraordinary group of people, and for giving us a tool to latch onto. We don't have illusions that there is a silver bullet out there, but anything that can move in the right direction, which means weakening the regime of Israel and weakening the US support for it, is moving us in the right direction. And that's why I support this initiative. I also want to say that, well, Miko has told us the reality of an entrenched system. What is different now is that we have a global movement. And sure, we have not been able to do nearly enough, or we wouldn't see the horrors that we're seeing not only in Gaza and the West Bank. But I want to first just give a sense of that global movement. Those of you who scroll through your social media not only see the horrors every day of what's happening, but also see the beautiful manifestations of this global movement. You see massive outpourings in the street from Bangladesh to Indonesia, Japan, Ireland, the UK, where I was just there. They have massive demonstrations every month. The Netherlands, that has just forced its governments to take more measures. The US, where we have done demonstrations all over this country, Brazil, Australia, and let's not forget Yemen, where millions of people come out onto the streets. And through these street protests, the BDS campaigns, our educational work, the cultural events, and thank you so much to Roger Waters for your work, we have now people all over the world who care about Palestine, whose eyes are on Palestine. And I want to be clear that leaders in the world, even progressive ones, don't just wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to do something about Israel's genocide. They have a lot of other issues on their plate. When they act because of grassroots pressure. That's even true in South Africa, where it was grassroots pressure that pushed South Africa to take the courageous step to bring the case to the International Court of Justice. Grassroots pressure that got 12 other countries to sign on. Grassroots pressure that helped create the Hague Group, originally just 9 members, but 30 states felt the pressure to show up, and 12 of them have formally committed to banning arms transfers and blocking military shipments at their ports. Global pressure shifts public opinion, which we have seen at an extraordinary rate here in the United States, despite the horrific corporate media we have, and despite the Congress and the White House that's controlled by AIPAC. So now we have to shift the global policy to push all of those 140 countries that have voted to demand an end to the occupation to back up those words with action. And I'm really glad that Craig tells us that many of those nations hide behind the veto power of the US and the Security Council. We can't let them hide behind that anymore. We are simply asking them to comply with international law, which requires intervention. I want us to take a moment to just envision what a protection force could look like. We have talked about it could be by land, by sea, by air, but I think the clearest way to imagine it is by sea. Why? Because we have the inspiring example of the flotilla, which is now literally setting sail with dozens of boats taking off for Gaza, representing 40 different countries. It is extraordinary that global citizens are doing this, putting their lives on the line, but it should be a job for states. Instead of these fragile sailing boats that Israel boards with impunity, kidnapping the participants. Imagine naval ships flying with the flags of sovereign nations, carrying food, doctors, baby formula, protecting citizens with the full weight of nation states. I want to quote UN Rapporteur Francesca Albanese, who said, member states who have a port in the Mediterranean Sea must absolutely send their navies under their national flags with humanitarian aid, doctors. Every Mediterranean country, including France, Italy, Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, and Spain, should send their navies to Gaza to break the siege and stop the genocide. History will not forget, she said. We want a protection force. We want a UN-led trade boycott. We want to stop the flow of weapons, all weapons. And let's say that we do not agree to this ridiculous discussion that Democrats in Congress are having about offensive versus defensive weapons. We want to cut off all weapons to Israel. And I want to say a word about the largest weapons supplier to Israel, the United States. The millions of us who have been protesting in the streets and in the suites and the halls of Congress, on the campuses, the truth tellers like the ones on this webinar and the social media, we are making change. It is agonizingly slow, but it's happening. And the more we step up our activism, the sooner that change will come. I want to give just a few examples. In the July 30th vote in the Senate, 27 senators voted with Bernie Sanders against a weapons package to Israel. In the U.S. context, remember, AIPAC controlled Congress. This is remarkable. And just last week, thanks to constituent pressure, 3 centrist Democrats, not the progressives, announced that they will no longer take AIPAC money. 2 of them from North Carolina and 1 from Kentucky. And you might have missed the statements by Donald Trump in an interview this week with the right-wing Daily Caller. He said, if you get back 20 years, Israel had the strongest lobby in Congress of any company, corporation, or state I've ever seen. Today, it doesn't nearly have as strong a lobby. It's amazing, he said. There was a time when you couldn't say a bad word about Israel if you wanted to be a politician, but that's really changed. And the interviewer asked him, well, said there's a growing group within the MAGA movement, the American First Coalition, Republicans, especially younger Republicans, who are skeptical of U.S. support for Israel. He asked Donald Trump, "Are you aware of this group? Are you worried about it?" And Trump replied, "Israel is going to have to get that war over with. It's hurting Israel, no question about it. They may be winning the war, but they're not winning the world of public relations." So I don't want to end with the words of the genocide supporter Donald Trump. I'd rather end with a different image, which is the Venice Film Festival, where the docudrama The Voice of Hind Rajab received a record-breaking 23-minute standing ovation. The heartbreaking story of 5-year-old Hind Rajab, the Palestinian girl trapped in a car and viciously murdered by the Israeli military, brought a global audience to its feet in grief and solidarity. So yes, we have won the world of global public opinion. The question is now is whether we can transform that moral power into political power, whether we can transform that into power to force the United Nations to act. And I think we can. The people of Palestine cannot wait. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Medea. Thank you for all your wonderful work, for your wisdom. Thank you for that image of a 23-minute record-breaking standing ovation. And thank you for affirming that we have won in the court of public opinion. And it's very important for us to recognize that we are minimized, we are diminished, we are dismissed, we are told that resistance is futile. They say that because they're terrified of this resistance. So, it's very important for us to continue that on every front. And one of the means of that is by us developing greater coordination across the human rights movements around the world for us to be able to push together, whether it's for boycotts, for military embargoes and so on. There are just so many things that we can do together with or without the UN. So this is a win-win no matter what, but there really is there's an opening, there's a potential strategic opening here. And you'll hear more from Medea and from us about what these strategic opportunities are as they come along. Like, for example, Pingo's Day of Action, Global Day of Action on the 18th of September in New York City. We will be lifting up these and other calls for action and helping people, all of us, to engage and use our power, which we have and which you so beautifully demonstrate, Medea. There's much more to be said. We are quite over our time. And we have a wonderful member of the press. We invited just a couple of select press, and there were a few who were able to make it. One of them, Ray Hanania, with Arab News, which has incredible reach, and it's particularly Arab and Muslim countries who are and the global South in general, who are going to make or break this initiative in the UN, this very powerful moment that we have right now. And so we're just really delighted that Ray Hanania did come. He is going to write this up. He's also going to be here on Sunday. And again, we encourage everyone to come. Now, he did have to leave, but he will be back, and he's very excited about this. Now, we have one other member of the press that we invited to be here, that we are so lucky to have her with us. I think she is also an icon of the press for all of us, and that's Rania Khaled with Breakthrough News. And thank you, Rania, for being here. Thank you for all your powerful work. And we'd like to give you the floor just for a moment to ask a question or make a comment, and you can direct this to one of the speakers if you would like, or more general. We can take just a few minutes for this. Then we will address one or two questions that have been submitted, and then we'll adjourn for today, but welcoming people to come back on Sunday if you so like. Go ahead, Rania.
Oh, thank you for inviting me to be here to be able to ask some questions. And I really do consider myself a student of so many of you. So I appreciate getting to join you for this. And I also just want to give a special kind of thank you shout out to my soul sister out there, Susan Abulhawa, who gave a speech that, you know, sometimes when we all feel a little defeated, at least lit a fire in me. So thank you for that. And I also wanted to just, you know, ask a few questions. I'm going to kind of ask a bunch and you can do what you want with them. I appreciate what Ali Abunimah said about the UN and, you know, not really having much faith in its ability to do much. And I think that a lot of us feel that way about international law and, you know, the current international order. Sorry, I don't know what happened to my camera. Did it just go out? Well, either way, I'm just going to keep talking because you can hear me, I assume.
Yes,
yes. But the point is that, you know, with regard to the issue of, I guess, using the UN and international law, you know, I guess my question would be, what would it take for the General Assembly itself to invoke this Uniting for Peace measure, and who needs to lead that charge? I guess maybe that would be a question for Craig in terms of the specifics about like, would it be specific countries, or is this something individuals can push? And to that, to being, you know, specific individuals or organizations, my next question would be, how can global movements, especially those that have been organizing around or against the genocide in the West, how would they be able to help in applying pressure to make these mechanisms more than just theoretical? And then, you know, to what Ali was saying earlier about the UN, I would also ask, and maybe Ali can speak to this, what alternatives exist outside of the UN framework for meaningful international action, if any? And then the last thing I would want to say, and I mean, this, I don't know who would want to take this or if anyone can take this, and maybe it's a bit more rhetorical, is there was a lot of conversation about the fact that, especially from Craig, you know, about the fact that the US would get in the way of any attempt to do these things and the various bullying ways that we're used to the US engaging in. And so, you know, we've seen the US continue to arm Israel. We've seen the US and Israel act as a team to basically annihilate any forces that have tried to step in to protect Palestinians, whether we're talking about Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen, where the Israelis just assassinated their political leadership, or whether, you know, we're talking about the latest war on Iran that we just witnessed with like a second round in the near future. And so I guess, and again, this is maybe a bit more rhetorical, and just to start a conversation for the future about this, at what point do we extend these measures to the US itself, if it's the biggest obstacle to stopping the Israelis? And I recognize we're talking about practical actions here, but again, I'm just kind of throwing that out there to maybe start a conversation, or perhaps people are already thinking about that sort of thing. But anyways, that's all I have to ask, so I'll leave it there.
Thank you so very much, Rania. Those are really great questions. I want to first just see whether Abudi, is there anything you want to jump in on? Don't feel, I hate to put you on the spot, but I do want to give you the option as really kind of the voice of Palestinian civil society to take the first crack at any of those questions if you are so moved. Don't feel like you need to, though.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I was preparing myself.
Okay.
And thank you for Rania for her amazing questions. I want to take a jab on two issues. The first one is that it's the responsibility of states. It needs political will behind it. We've seen already the president of Colombia say that he intends to file a motion at the General Assembly Uniting for Peace for a protective force to protect Palestinian civilians. And I think this is an important step and shows political will. What I think is that this political will is not generated in the vacuum. It is generated by people like yourselves, like the audience, like the larger people in the streets, the people that are participating in the Samud Flotilla, every kind of activist or person that pushes for change. The second thing that I want to reflect on is the US. I think really the US needs to feel the consequences of its actions, of its violations of the international system. We all know that the UN system, international system, was established primarily by the United States following World War II. And this was intended actually to minimize conflict and to, I'm saying in the discourse, it was intended to promote peace, minimize conflicts, and great organizations were established like FAO, the World Food Program, WHO, UN Women, amazing organizations. I think one of the issues today that really need to be considered is the complete moving of UN headquarters from New York to a third state. And I would really promote moving it to Africa. Africa, everyone knows, does not have a permanent seat at the United Nations. And I would actually even encourage South Africa to go forward and promote itself as a country that is loving peace, a country that was able to overcome apartheid, and to be the new headquarters of the United Nations. I think this will send a massive message. This is not in the works of advocacy right now, but I would also float this idea out there. Those are my 2 cents.
Thank you so much. Very powerful ideas. I want to just see if others on the speakers panel would like to jump in and answer. I know many people could answer all of those questions, but I want to open it to those who are still here. And yes, and I see most of our speakers are still here. Thank you so much. Does anyone want to jump in? All right, Craig, great.
Yeah, I think those are, first of all, just to endorse everything that Ubay said. I agree absolutely on those things. For Rania's questions, you know, and this is something that's come up throughout the discussion today is, you know, why are we wasting our time on the UN? Why are we wasting our time on international institutions and international law? And those are fair questions. Anyone who knows me knows that I am principally a critic of international institutions for their failure, in particular over the course of the last 2 years. But when, you know, if we want to be strategic, we have to look at these things with a more nuanced lens, and you have to ask which UN, right? So there is UNRWA is the UN, and UNRWA has been absolutely essential to the survival and self-determination of the Palestinian people from the very beginning. And UNRWA colleagues have given their lives in their hundreds, murdered by the Israelis just since the beginning of this current wave of genocide in Gaza. There can be no critique of UNRWA in that regard. They've been absolutely heroic. People have mentioned the UN human rights mechanisms, like the Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, who has been strong and principled throughout. We don't want to throw out that baby with the bathwater. So important. And so it is with humanitarians and people working on human rights and so on. That's the UN as well. But what Ali underscored correctly is that it's the political side of the house that has been so fundamentally corrupted and weakened that it's been unable or unwilling to do the job that the UN Charter says that it's supposed to do. Now, people who have been around for a little while will know that the UN was an absolutely essential forum for the national liberation struggles of the 1960s and 70s and for the campaign to end apartheid in South Africa. And those struggles changed the United Nations. They changed the reality on the ground for so many of those countries. They understood that you will never get your liberation only through international law, only through international institutions. But if you're smart, you will use those laws and institutions to your end. And if you look at international law, you will see that in every case, international law comes down on the side of the Palestinian people and their struggle. That's why Israel is on trial for genocide in the International Court of Justice. That's why Israel's leaders have been indicted by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. That's why every international human rights organization, UN human rights mechanism, Palestinian human rights organizations, Israeli human rights organizations have come down on the side of the Palestinian people and against genocide and apartheid that they have found exist. We wouldn't be wise to throw those tools away, just as we wouldn't be wise to rely upon them entirely for the struggle of Palestinian liberation. And this mechanism of uniting for peace is one piece that has not been used in this way And in the midst of a genocide and the extermination of a people, the UN and everyone and everything that makes up the UN has an obligation to use every arrow in its quiver. Not because you know that arrow is going to actually hit the target, but because you would be foolish not to use it, not to try when the stakes are as high as they are now. It's entirely possible that we will fail. But it's also possible that these kinds of measures, and here I'm talking about the protection force, and other actions that we want the GA to take at this moment, like sanctions and a military embargo and withdrawing the credentials of Israel and establishing a tribunal for war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocide and restarting the anti-apartheid mechanisms and mobilizing the protection force. Together, those things can help to change the incentive structures of Israel and its co-perpetrator in the United States. It can change their political calculus on what they think they can get away with. It can reduce the material capacity they have to continue in the realities that the horrific realities that they're advancing. And it can help to chip away at the endless impunity that Israel has enjoyed for 80 years, sponsored by the West and in particular by the United States. And if it can do any of that as a piece of the broader struggle of Palestinian liberation, then we are all obliged to do everything we can to make it happen. Last thing I'll say, Jill, is that it won't happen without public pressure. Delegations of all 193 countries would rather make decisions in the shadows in Turtle Bay. They'd rather hide behind the US veto. They'd rather adopt symbolic resolutions calling for a ceasefire than do this. And our job, the job of all people of conscience, is to shine the bright light of publicity on those processes, to point out to the world that they have an opportunity to actually provide protection to the Palestinian people. And they will have to choose yes or no, knowing that the Palestinian people have asked for this protection. They will have the chance to say yes or no, and let's hold them accountable. And if they continue to fail, if none of these measures, this menu that have been laid out for them and is ready to go, and that they have the power to implement are adopted, then we know what the next front of the struggle is going to have to be. And it's these institutions themselves.
Thank you so much, Craig. Very powerful words. And I've just gotten a text from Max Blumenthal, who might be in the house. Max, are you still here? Max, if you are still here, just text me so we can lift you up. And apologies that you've been
Dr.
waiting.
Jill, Dr. Jill, can you have him raise his hand?
Okay. Max, can you raise your hand? Let me see if I can just text him right now.
Or several hands just went up in the chat.
Several hands just went up in the chat. There are several. Will the real Max Blumenthal please stand up?
His hand is or was raised.
It is?
It was. I think it went down unless somebody grabbed him and brought him into this room. Let me look and see.
There he is. Okay. The real Max Blumenthal is here. Thank you so much, Max. And I apologize that I did not catch the news that you were actually in the room. I knew that there was a possibility you might come. So this is really wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. And we want to give you the floor to contribute a few thoughts and questions and comments of your own. Thank you so much for all you do. You are another very powerful voice that's created this movement.
Thank you. I think I kind of have a tinny voice, but I guess you mean more in a metaphorical sense. Yeah, thanks for this important event, and thanks for everyone who's here and for including me. I was not able to catch all of the important comments today. I've been working on a piece that I thought was important that should be out momentarily about the Associated Press bureau chief participating in a secret Israeli propaganda event in Jerusalem. And I think, you know, it's important for those of us who are outspoken in our support of Palestinian liberation and who are anti-Zionist, who are members of the press, to really escalate right now, because our colleagues are being slaughtered in Gaza. And it's important right now to reinforce the point that Israeli media professionals, Israeli members of the press need to be completely stigmatized many of them, if not most of them, have participated in the Israeli military, and they should be stigmatized from our community. And members of the press that collaborate with the Israeli government and pro-Israel organizations need to be called out, especially as CBS News is about to be handed over to one of the most malign Israeli propagandists in Barry Weiss. So that, I think that's an important role for people in the media in the BDS context. As far as this meeting goes, I mean, my understanding is it's convened around pressing the UN to take a more interventionist role, which I completely agree with. But the UN is a captured organization, as we've seen so many of the subsidiaries of the UN, like the OPCW, have been captured by the United States. The UN building was set up by the Rockefellers. It's in New York. It obviously should be in a place like South Africa, but it's not. And I've been looking at the past 2 years and what's been effective in deterring Israel, making Israel feel like it is not omnipotent. And one of the more important actions came from the Nicaraguan government, which is led by the Sandinista party, is heavily sanctioned, heavily attacked. And, you know, Israel and Israeli intelligence cutouts like UN Watch have taken a strong interest in Nicaragua and pushing regime change there because of what it has done to attempt to prosecute the German government for its role in supplying Israel with weapons. Germany is the #2 supplier to the Israeli genocide in Gaza. And I think these kinds of actions that take place outside the UN are extremely important, and coordinating with governments like Nicaragua that I consider to be sort of resistance governments in the Americas needs to be considered as an alternative to multilateral actions. And we can also look at what imperialist forces have done to tear down independent governments. For example, the government of Syria. There's currently action being carried out. It's being taken by the government of France, but various NGOs actually set the stage for this, NGOs that were sponsored by the State Department and other imperialist forces to prosecute Bashar al-Assad, who's no longer president. And it's because they know they can't get this done at the ICC. They can't get it done through multilateral institutions. And so, I mean, the flip side of that is there might be ways to at least arrange prosecutions of Israeli officials in national courts in countries that are willing to stand up. So my question is, why are we focused so much on the UN? I also think the Hind Rajab Foundation has the right idea also of targeting Israeli war criminals, including soldiers, reservists, special forces members, when they go on vacation in Latin America and other countries. This really has a powerful deterrent force on Israel. So why are we focused on the UN rather than focused on national prosecutions or working in the capacity that the Hind Rajab Foundation does to target Israelis in a legal and political sense who are involved in war crimes wherever they are?
Thank you, Max. Are you hearing me? Yeah, thank you so much. And we're in complete agreement. Many people who are here today were at the rally yesterday for the expanded filing of Taxpayers Against Genocide, which is trying to get to bring into the international courts the charge against U.S. officials for abusing our tax dollars by spending them against our interests and against expressed public opinion. And, you know, I don't think anyone is saying don't do everything else that you're doing, but rather that this is a credible chance, a kind of once in a lifetime chance that all these things align between the General Assembly's prior and existing commitment to actually enforcing with really severe measures, boycott, military embargo, stripping Israel of its credentials in the UN, and sending a protection force to ensure that the Palestinian people are protected and fed. There is enough of a chance here that, I think for many people, this is a chance worth taking. This doesn't go on for years to come. Go to court and you're going to be fighting that for quite a while. This is kind of an immediate, I wouldn't say short term necessarily, but this benefits us, in my view, because it's high visibility and it gives us a chance to rally together across, many movements and borders to take this experiment actually in international democracy, which essentially does not exist, but here's a moment where it might. And the institutions are there for this to happen between the deadline for the General Assembly to actually impose consequences and to impose those requirements. The General Assembly has already committed to doing that in about a 10-to-1 ratio. So the support is enormous if they can have their feet held to the fire. The UN representatives have their feet held to the fire and they can follow through on that. It would be utterly transformative. And in the process, we get stronger. So in my personal view, I have not been otherwise involved in things at the UN for the reasons that most of us haven't. But this has enough, kind of reality to it that each of us does our own calculus here. And because this is a very, the effort required is not all-consuming and it doesn't go on forever, considering the potentially transformative impact that it could have. For
Jill,
many of us, I think this is a risk worth taking. But I'll open the floor to anybody else who wants to jump in here.
Jill, may I just
Please, Ellie.
say something briefly? I'll have to sign off because I have another commitment at the top of the hour. But I also wanted to just also respond to Ranya's question. What are the alternatives to the UN? And I believe we should fight on every front. And if the UN is a viable front, fight there. And I say that despite my skepticism about the UN mechanisms, which have been so corrupted and so hollowed out. And that's symbolized again by the cowardly and complicit political leadership at the UN. But the alternatives are that we also have to press our individual states and governments to act. They cannot hide behind the UN. They cannot say, oh, we would act, but we're waiting for the UN to pass a resolution or the Security Council to pass a resolution or whatever it is. It's the same with Europe. We see Ireland making many good statements, but not following up by action. And they say, oh, well, we're trying to work within the EU to get sanctions or to get the EU-Israel Association Agreement. These are excuses. Ireland is, I think, the first Western country. It's sad to call Ireland a Western country because it's a formerly colonized country, but it is part of the EU and it is under the thumb of US corporations. So we have to count it in that camp as far as the state is concerned, if not the people. But Ireland is the first Western state to say at the highest level of government that this is a genocide. Well, what does that mean then? It means that Ireland's legal obligations under the Genocide Convention attach. And those obligations are on the Irish state, not on the EU, not on the UN. Those obligations may be there separately on the EU and the UN, but Ireland as an individual state has an obligation to act. And all countries that have recognized this genocide have an obligation to act, to impose sanctions, to impose the sorts of measures that Jeffrey Sachs mentioned, but sadly no country has really done yet. Some have done little bits here and there, but nothing to the level that we've seen, for example, with the Western war on Russia, where the EU brags that it's imposed 18 different sanctions packages on Russia. They've run out of things to sanction. Israel hasn't been sanctioned at all by the EU. It's full complicity in genocide. So we have to keep pushing our individual governments to say, you cannot hide behind the UN or the EU or any other body. And this goes too for the big countries. You know, it has to be said. A lot of us talk about a multipolar world and shifting alliances and so on. But China has not done anything really beyond rhetoric. And that pains me because China's statements and its legal positions with respect to Palestine have largely been excellent. Yes, I disagree with some positions, but you know, that's okay. But on the whole, China, for example, is one of the few countries that is willing to openly state that Palestinians have a right to engage in armed resistance, which they certainly do. But China remains one of the biggest trading partners of Israel. Ireland remains one of Israel's biggest trading partners. So we have not seen governments putting their money where their mouth is. And that's where I think popular pressure has to continue from. It has to be from the grassroots up, because even at the United Nations, these governments won't act unless they know that their people back home are demanding it in every possible way. So that's the thing I want to urge. Keep pressing individual governments, keep making noise, keep protesting. Don't let those politicians sleep at night. Be outside their houses, honking and hollering and doing whatever you have to do. And with that, I will sign off. And again, thank you all for this enormously important initiative. I've learned a lot by listening to everyone, and it's been a privilege to participate.
Likewise, thank you, Ali, and thank you for what I think is going to be our closing remarks, because I'm hearing from Mark behind the cameras there that he's really got a terrific, I don't know, headache, pain in his neck, whatever. But I think for all of our sakes, we have to take care of ourselves in order to keep working on the world. So this has been wonderful. And I just want to say, in follow-up to Ali's comments, that the title of this webinar is "We Do Have the Power to End Genocide Now." And it's focused, you know, on this moment of potential profound opportunity, but it's not limited to that. You know, the basic notion here that we're challenging is that we are powerless. So we're challenging that powerlessness, and through some of the other mechanisms that Ali just went through and have been mentioned, like from Jeffrey Sachs and all that. That's really, these are wonderful, and we should be working on these as parallel, you know, parallel campaigns that we will also try to move forward. And I also want to thank, you know, not only the members of the panel, everybody out there participating. Thank you all so much for being here and for everything that you do. We are having another panel on Sunday where we will have some new speakers as well as some of the core speakers again. And I want to specifically invite members of the press who we only saw were here at the last moment. So would you please send an email, anyone from the press who's here, send an email to mark@lifelineforpalestine.com, and we'll be sure to feature you as, you know, as the press who will, you know, comment. And again, everybody who submitted questions, they're great questions. Hopefully some of them got answered in the course of this discussion, and we hope to have time for that as well. And there is discussion about a continuing series of webinars as well. So it's pretty hard to crunch all this, into 2 or 3 hours on 2 occasions. Hopefully this will be an ongoing dialogue. So again, big thank you to everyone here, to every one of our speakers. Thank you for all you're doing, and we will continue this conversation soon. And I also want to shout out, by the way, to Aliyah Khan and to Lebo Panadao, who are our people behind the scenes who are making this amazing conference happen. So thank you so much to everyone. Thanks again to Craig Mokhiber for kind of planting the seeds that have gotten a lot of people going right now. And thank you to the members of the press. We value you more than ever. And, we're taking your words very seriously, especially Max invoking what a crisis the press is in. And every member of the press here is certainly in the firing line right now as well. And we greatly value your participation and your courage to keep telling the truth. Thank you all so very much. And together we are the lifeline for Palestine.